I discovered I was part of a sinister experiment and fought to expose the truth. Reddit stories. They say families are like puzzles, every piece different, yet meant to fit together in some way. But what if one piece was never part of the box to begin with? I used to believe my family was ordinary, uneventful. We had traditions, birthdays, Sunday breakfasts. Dad grilled steaks in the summer while Mom fussed about getting everyone to wear sunscreen. My older sister Emily was the golden child, straight A's, orchestra, volunteer hours. I, on the other hand, was the quiet one, the sensitive one. Teachers always said I had an active imagination, especially when I told them I sometimes felt like I didn't belong. They chalked it up to middle child syndrome or teenage angst, and for a while, so did I. But things started to shift around my 17th birthday. It was something so small, something that could have easily slipped under anyone else's radar, a birthday card. It was hidden behind a stack of bills on the kitchen counter, sealed in a plain white envelope. No glitter, no cartoon animals, just the faintest scent of lavender and a return address I didn't recognize. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. Happy 18th, Maya. I think about you every day. Love always, Jay. At first, I thought it was a mistake. A card for someone else misdelivered, maybe. But the handwriting was familiar. It was the same looping cursive Mom used when writing grocery lists or notes for the neighbors. Except, it wasn't signed Mom. It wasn't even her usual ink color. I stuffed the card back in the envelope, slipped it into my hoodie pocket, and tried to forget about it. But forgetfulness doesn't come easy when your own name isn't the one on the card, and the age is off by a year. My birthday was that week, but I was turning 17, not 18. So who was turning 18 and who was Jay? That night at dinner, I watched them closely. Mom, Dad, Emily. They were cheerful, talking about the neighborhood dog show. Mom laughed a little too loud. Dad's eyes didn't quite meet mine when he asked about my day. Emily seemed distracted, like she was waiting for something. I couldn't bring myself to bring up the card. The next morning, I went through the family photo albums. Not just the ones on the shelf. Those were always neat, curated, safe. I dug out the dusty boxes from the attic. The ones labeled backups and unsorted. My hands trembled as I flipped through the photos, one after another. Birthday parties, first days of school, Christmases, and then halfway through a stack from 2007, something strange at a photo I didn't recognize. It was of a toddler, maybe 3 years old, with a pink bow in her hair, sitting on a grassy hill looking off to the side. She looked like me, but not quite. Her eyes were wider, her smile sharper. Something about the angle of the light, it felt eerie. I turned the photo over. Maya, 2009, it said in the same cursive as the card. But that couldn't be. In 2009, I would have been, not 3. And I'd never owned that dress. The walls of certainty began to shift. Over the next week, I began to notice more oddities. I overheard hushed conversations between my parents in the laundry room. Emily got snappy when I asked her questions about our childhood. A neighbor, Mr. Harrow, who'd lived next door since forever, once casually asked how the other girl was doing. When I asked what he meant, he went quiet and said he was just confusing timelines. Whatever that meant, I started keeping a journal, writing down every inconsistency. I needed a map, a way to navigate this growing storm, and every thread led back to that card. That damn birthday card from Jay. One afternoon, when everyone was out, I slipped into my parents' room. I had never snooped there before. It felt like crossing some invisible line, but something inside me needed the truth. In the back of Mom's closet, behind her winter coats, I found a lockbox. It was cheap, plastic, and surprisingly light. The key was in her jewelry box, like she hadn't even tried to hide it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all from the same person. Some on floral stationery, some typed, all signed J. Some were dated from before I was born, others from the year I turned 5. One stood out. It had a Polaroid photo clipped to it. The girl again, the one from the hill. The letter read, "You promised me visitation, at the very least. It's been 4 years and I haven't heard a word." You took her and disappeared. I never agreed to this. She has a right to know who I am. I dropped the letter. My heart pounded in my throat. My palms were slick with sweat. Who had my parents taken? Who was this child that looked like me? Or was it me? Had I been taken from someone? The day after, I confronted my mom. Not directly, I couldn't yet. Instead, I asked her, casually, if I had ever been in contact with someone named NJ. She stiffened. Her hands paused in the sink. What do you mean? She had voice flat. I shrugged. Just found something with that name on it. Thought it might be someone we knew. She didn't answer. Just told me to focus on my schoolwork and stop digging through things that weren't mine to find. But if it wasn't mine, why was I in the photos? That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, the shadows from the streetlight forming vague outlines above me. I thought about the girl in the Polaroid, her smile, her name. If she was Maya, then who was I? I needed answers, real ones, and I had an idea where to start. The return address on the birthday card was still in my hoodie, a town 3 hours away. I looked it up online. Small, quiet, barely any information. But one listing stood out: a flower shop, lavender and lace, the same scent as the envelope. The next Saturday, I told my parents I was going to a college prep workshop. They barely questioned it. I took the bus, watching the city fade into farmland. Every mile added weight to my chest. When I arrived, the shop was exactly as I imagined. Quaint, white-walled, filled with the smell of drying petals and sun-warmed wood. I stepped inside and time felt like it slowed. A woman behind the counter looked up, mid-30s. Dark hair, eyes that looked like mine. She froze when she saw me, and that's when I knew. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Her reaction wasn't loud. No gasp, no tears, no running to embrace me. It was subtle. Just a soft inhale, a tiny tremble in her hand as she set down the scissors she was using to trim lavender stems. Her eyes scanned my face like she was comparing it to a photograph long forgotten, filed away in a place marked. Too painful to revisit. The silence between us grew heavy, dense. The kind of silence that carries years and secrets. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't rehearsed anything. My plan ended with getting off the bus and stepping through the shop door. Now, standing in front of the woman who might be the key to my unraveling life, all I could manage was, I. She blinked, her lips parting slightly, then closing again. Finally, she spoke. You're early. I wasn't sure if she meant the time of day or something deeper. My heart thumped in my chest like a drum solo out of rhythm. I tried to keep my voice even. I found the birthday card. She nodded like this confirmed something she already knew. I didn't expect you to see it, she said, turning slightly to straighten a small bucket of tulips. I thought she'd throw it out. She meant my mother. The woman turned back to me. Her eyes held a storm, a quiet but powerful one. She motioned to a bench near the front window, the kind with floral cushions that sag a little from use. I sat. She joined me but left a noticeable gap between us. She looked like she wanted to reach out, but didn't. I'm Julia, she said. And you go by Maya. I nodded slowly. That's what everyone calls me? She exhaled through her nose and looked away for a second. That's the name I gave you. At birth. I didn't know how to react to that. It was a sentence made of bricks, heavy, solid, immovable. All I could do was blink and try to process. I don't understand, I said. I mean, I do. But I don't. She nodded. It's okay. You're not supposed to understand yet. But I owe you the truth. Outside, a breeze stirred the wind chimes hanging from the awning. They made soft, random music, almost like background noise to the surreal scene playing out between us. Julia folded her hands in her lap and started speaking. Not rushed, not dramatic, just honest. You were born a week before your due date. She began. Emergency C-section, your father wasn't there. He'd already left. I was alone. My parents had passed by then, and I didn't have any siblings. I wasn't ready to raise a child on my own, not really. I thought I could be, but... Her voice cracked on the but. I met your mother through a mutual friend. She'd had several miscarriages, wanted a child more than anything. And at the time, I thought, maybe it's a sign that she'd give you the life I couldn't. She didn't want an adoption agency. Said it felt cold. She wanted something human. Direct. I stared at her, stunned. So she just took me? Like a transaction. Julia flinched, like my words physically hurt. No, I didn't sell you. It wasn't like that. I loved you. I still do. But I was scared. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I'd be part of your life. That there'd be visits, birthdays, letters. Her voice grew quieter. But after the first year, they cut me off. No calls. No letters returned. I drove past your house once on your second birthday. I saw the balloons. That was it. But I felt 100 things at once. Betrayal, confusion, a strange echo of sadness that didn't feel like mine, but had lived in me anyway, all these years. But why now? I asked. Why the card this year? Julia looked at me like the answer was obvious. Because I thought you were turning 18. I thought maybe you'd be in college. Or moving out. I didn't know they told you nothing. I leaned back against the cushion, my head spinning. The card, the photo, the strange memories that never quite made sense, like how I never had a birth certificate in my baby box, or how my parents never told stories about Mom being pregnant with me. They always talked about Emily's birth like it was a glorious, chaotic miracle. But me? Just, you came along, they'd say, like I'd appeared. A thought struck me, sudden and sharp. Was Emily in on it? I asked. Julia hesitated. Don't know, she was so young when it happened. But later, she might have figured it out. Maybe even confronted them. I don't know. I couldn't imagine Emily confronting anyone. But then again, I hadn't known her as well as I thought, apparently. I stood. I couldn't sit anymore. So what now? What am I supposed to do with this? Julia didn't try to stop me. She stood too, keeping her distance. I don't know. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know you weren't forgotten. You weren't abandoned. That's all. Her words sank into me like stones dropped into deep water. I left without hugging her, without promising anything. I stepped out of the flower shop into the fading daylight, trying to breathe. The bus ride home was a blur. I don't remember what I saw out the window. I don't remember the sounds or the announcements. I just remember the sinking feeling in my gut, like something had shifted inside me, and I couldn't unshift it. Couldn't rewind. When I got home, the lights were on. Mom was in the kitchen, stirring something in a pot. The smell of soup filled the air. Comfort food, like she knew I'd need it. But I didn't sit at the table. I walked past her up the stairs into my room, locked the door, and cried loud. Just quiet, angry tears. For the years I didn't get, for the truth I wasn't told, for the identity that now felt like paper in the rain, softening, dissolving, unreadable. The next morning, I didn't go to school. I told them I was sick. They didn't push. Emily came into my room around noon. She sat on the edge of my bed like she'd done 100 times before, but this time she was different. Quieter, heavier, like she knew. You found her, she said, not as a question. I didn't answer. I just looked at her. She used to send letters when you were little. Emily continued. I read one once. I was 8. I didn't tell Mom, but I remembered the name. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. I didn't know how. I didn't understand what was going on. And when I got older, it just seemed easier to pretend everything was fine, that we were a normal family. Her voice shook. But you were never normal. Not in a bad way. Just you always felt like a ghost was sitting on your shoulder, like you were waiting for something to make sense. I hated how right she was. Over the next few days, things were quiet, at least on the surface. But silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's just the quiet before the ground gives way. Mom cornered me one evening. She was holding a photo album. Her hands trembled. I know, I said before she could open her mouth. She looked tired. Older. I did what I thought was best, she whispered. Best for who? She didn't answer, just handed me the album and walked away. Inside were photos I hadn't seen before. Me as a baby held by Julia. Me in a stroller next to Julia's flower shop. And then, photos where Julia disappeared and only my Creole family remained. It was like watching someone slowly edited out of a narrative. A vanishing act in still frames. The final page was empty. Just a plastic sleeve waiting for a photo that hadn't been taken. I sat with that album for hours, turning pages, flipping them back, searching for something I couldn't name. And then, an idea came to me, quiet at first, almost laughable, but it grew. What if the story I'd been living wasn't the whole story? What if there was a missing chapter? And what if I wasn't just a daughter misplaced? What if I was something else entirely? Something that neither Julia nor my parents were ready to admit. Something they all feared. The more I thought about it, the less I felt like a victim. And the more I started to feel like a key. A key to something they'd all tried to lock away. It began with the dreams. Subtle at first, soft-edged fragments that didn't seem like much, just flashes of places I didn't recognize. A rust-colored room with no windows. A carousel turning slowly in a field of fog. The scent of lavender mixed with something darker, metallic. I'd wake up gasping, unsure whether I'd been running from something or toward it. But one thing was constant, the dreams all ended the same way. With someone whispering my name, not Maya, a different name. One I couldn't quite hear, just feel. Like it existed on a frequency just outside normal sound. By the end of that week, I stopped questioning whether the card and the photo were just family secrets. I knew they were part of something larger, something older, something intentionally buried. So I started digging. I began with public records, birth certificates, census data, court filings. I used school computers and burner emails. I didn't want my parents to catch on. I was smart about it, discreet. But for every answer I uncovered, 3 more questions erupted. There was no birth record for me in the local hospital where Mom said she'd delivered. No vaccination records before age 2. Nothing official until the year I started preschool. And even then, everything looked like it had been filed late, backdated. Then I found something curious. A sealed court case from 17 years ago. A woman petitioning for guardianship over a minor child, initials MJ. The petition was denied and immediately locked by court order. The judge's name was familiar. He was a friend of my father's, mentioned once at a barbecue, long before I ever thought to remember. It was Julia. It had to be. I couldn't get access to the details. Sealed meant sealed. But that case proved something had happened. Something legal. Something hidden. I didn't bring any of this up at home. Our dinners had become quiet rituals of avoidance. Dad watched the news without hearing it. Mom baked cookies she didn't eat. Emily floated through the house like a ghost already packing her bags for college. One night, I tried to push her. Do you ever wonder what else they've lied about? She flinched. Oh, all the time. But wondering doesn't fix anything. Neither does pretending. She looked at me like she wanted to say something important. But instead, she got up and left. I almost followed her. Almost. Instead, I returned to my journal. Pages of timelines, guesses, questions. I'd started pinning things to a corkboard in my closet. A crime scene I was building piece by piece. And the center of it all wasn't me. It was the name I kept hearing in my dreams. The one I couldn't pronounce. The one that wasn't Maya. And then I made a mistake. I emailed Julia. Not from my school account, of course. I made a dummy Gmail. I just wanted to ask her one thing. Who else knows? She replied instantly. More than you think. And some of them want you to stop asking. That was it. No hello. No signature. I stared at the screen for a long time, the cursor blinking like a pulse. That night, someone broke into our garage. They didn't steal anything, just moved things. Rearranged shelves. Turned off the breaker. It was a warning. No one said it out loud, but we all felt it. Mom triple locked every door. Dad installed motion cameras. But no one reported it. And that silence said more than any alarm could. After that, I stopped using the internet at home. I used public Wi-Fi, burned through SIM cards, started reading about privacy the way some people study religion. I learned how to cover my tracks, how to mask my digital footprints, because it was clear someone didn't want me looking too hard, and yet I couldn't stop. A week later, a package arrived at the flower shop. Julia forwarded it to me, no return address. Just to note it, you're not crazy, just rare. Inside was a folder. Documents, photos, pages from what looked like old case files. Some were photocopies. Some were original, yellowing at the edges. The folder had one word on the cover. Ikus? Inside I found the strangest thing, photos of children, all around my age. All with features eerily similar to mine. Not twins, but not strangers either. They were labeled by numbers, not names. Each one had a file, a birth date, health stats, behavioral notes. They looked like case studies. One note said, Subject 12 demonstrates strong sensory adaptation. Initial responses to separation trauma manageable. Emotional capacity high. A subject 12. My birth date matched. I was subject 12. But a subject of what? The deeper I read, the sicker I felt. The document spoke of a study. Something about emotional resilience under false identity conditions. A joint project between two private research institutes. Dates spanning the early 2000s. The words child reassignment were used more than once. There were mentions of adoption networks, informal custody exchanges, even altered medical histories. None of this made sense, and yet it explained everything. I called Julia from a payphone. My voice shook. What is this? What was I part of? She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, it wasn't supposed to go that far. It started as counseling, support for single mothers. They offered help, housing, therapy, food. But they wanted something back. Access, data, observations. I didn't know what they were really doing until it was too late, but why me? You were special. You connected with people in strange ways, not just emotionally. Sometimes physically. You changed the mood of rooms. You remembered things from before you could talk. They said you were gifted. That's the word they used. I almost laughed. You mean experimented on? I didn't know, she repeated. I swear to you. When I tried to get you back, they shut everything down. Told me you'd been placed with a control family. That's what they called them. And then the files vanished. The people did, too. I held the phone so tight my knuckles went white. Is that why they're watching me now? I think they never stopped. I hung up, walked home in the rain. Didn't even notice I was soaked until I dripped on the carpet. That night, I sat in my closet, staring at the corkboard. I rearranged the photos, moved the strings. And then I saw it. Every file I had, every photo, every news clipping, traced back to a single foundation, a nonprofit based out of Chicago, the Harmonia Institute. Their motto was restoring balance to disrupted lives. I checked their website. Sanitized, vague, pictures of children smiling, testimonials from fake-sounding parents, a contact page with no phone number. But I knew this was it. This was where it began. And if I wanted to end it, I had to go there. I made a plan, booked a bus, told my parents I was visiting colleges. I even printed a fake itinerary. Emily caught me packing. You're not coming back, are you? I zipped my bag. I don't know. She stepped into the doorway. I think I found something. In Mom's closet. An envelope with a USB. You should take it, Pa. What's on it? She handed it over. Didn't open it. Figured it wasn't mine to see. I looked at her and saw the fear, the loyalty, the guilt, but also the quiet strength of someone who had lived with shadows and still smiled. Thank you, I whispered. She nodded, then did something she hadn't done in years. She hugged me. Not a quick sibling squeeze, a real hug. One that said, whatever happens, I believe you. The next morning I left. I didn't look back. Because I wasn't just chasing answers anymore. I was chasing whoever decided that people like me could be rewritten. And I wasn't going to be erased. Chicago in late spring feels like a city waking up from hibernation. The wind off Lake Michigan still has bite, but the sun is starting to win its battles. People fill the streets. Tourists with cameras, commuters with coffee, children darting between benches in Millennium Park. On the surface, it's all motion and light. But I wasn't here for sunlight or scenery. I was here for the Harmonia Institute, the place that, if my research was right, didn't just help vulnerable families, they rewrote them. I arrived with one bag, a burner phone, and the USB Emily gave me. I hadn't opened it yet. Something about it made me nervous, like once I saw what was inside, there'd be no unseeing it. I needed to be ready. So instead, I focused on my plan. Step 1: visit the Institute. Not break in, not storm the gates. Just observe, learn, confirm. The address was real, listed under a family outreach center on the north side. A small, white brick building nestled between a dentist's office and a dry cleaner. Harmless, that's what made it chilling. I walked by 3 times before finally stepping through the door. Inside was soft music, children's artwork on the walls, a receptionist with warm eyes and pink reading glasses. "Can I help you?" she asked. My voice caught for a second. I cleared my throat. "I'm researching support programs for a school project. Is there someone I could talk to?" She smiled and handed me a pamphlet. "You can start with this. If you're interested in volunteering, our coordinator is back this afternoon." I took the paper and thanked her, trying to keep my hands from trembling. The moment I stepped outside, I ducked into a nearby alley and read the brochure. It talked about mentorship, trauma recovery, family counseling. But there were no names, no staff photos, no success stories, just vague words and stock images. That night, I finally plugged the USB into a library computer. There were 6 folders, each named after a Greek myth: Echo, Orpheus, Mnemosyne, Lethe, Icarus, and Pandora. I started with Co. Inside were video files, grainy, timestamped, silent. Children in observation rooms, being shown photos, being asked questions, completing puzzles. I recognized one of them. Me, sitting at a table, maybe 4 years old, placing colored blocks in a sequence. A woman's hand entered the frame to adjust a camera. I didn't look scared. I looked focused, like I'd done this 100 times before. I opened Lethe. Next. Documents, redacted names, emotional profiles. One file caught my attention. Subject 12. Early signs of long-term memory suppression conflict. Retains emotional echoes despite procedural resets. Recommend reassignment and identity stabilization. I reread that line 10 times. Memory suppression. Resets. Reassignment. They hadn't just taken me from Julia, they'd edited me. I printed everything I could and mailed copies to a P.O. box I'd opened under a fake name. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but I wasn't going to lose it. Not after what it cost to find. The next day, I returned to the center. This time, I wore a hoodie and kept my head down. I wasn't there to talk. I was there to watch. I spent hours across the street at a coffee shop, pretending to read while tracking who went in and out. Late afternoon, a woman arrived. Mid-40s, dark hair in a tight bun, black blazer. She didn't look like a therapist. She looked like security. But she was greeted warmly by the receptionist, and a child followed her inside. That's when I saw it, the logo on her clipboard, a simple symbol. 3 overlapping circles forming a triangle. I'd seen that symbol before, in the Pandora folder. That night I opened Pandora. It was a list, a long one. Names, cities, dates. I scanned down and stopped cold when I saw subject 12, Maya J. Control, Lynn and David R., followed by the date of my adoption. There were hundreds of names, some marked extracted, others dormant, a few unrecoverable. I was a dot in a network, one of many. My phone buzzed, unknown number. "I know what you're doing. We should talk before they do." No signature. I replied, "Who is this?" Nothing. The next morning, I found a note taped to my hostel door, just an address. No explanation. I stood at the edge of the block for half an hour before approaching. It was an old row house, windows dark. I knocked once. The door creaked open. "Come in quickly." A girl stood there, my age, maybe a year older, pale hair, sharp eyes. "I'm subject 9, she said flatly. "You can call me Lark." Inside, the living room was filled with corkboards, laptops, stacks of paper. Maps with pins, drawings, it looked like my closet board exploded into an apartment. "I've been tracking them for 2 years," she said. "You showing up made waves. You're on their radar now." I figured. She pointed to a screen. They called a protocol yesterday. Protocol 6. That's relocation. You stir up too much noise and they move everything. Staff files, even the kids. I swallowed hard. "What do we do?" She smirked. "We do what they never expect." She showed me a video. Footage from inside the center, recorded through a vent. A girl, maybe 6, coloring quietly. The woman in the blazer stood nearby, murmuring into a headset. "They're still running trials," Lark said. "Still rewriting kids." I felt something deep and primal rise in me. Rage. "I have to shut them down?" She nodded. "I've been building a packet. Evidence, timelines, testimonies. But I need one more thing." "What?" "Of a source on the inside. Someone who's still playing along." I thought of my father, his lawyer friends, the barbecue years ago. I might know someone. Lark raised an eyebrow. "Duh, then we've got a shot." That night, I called Emily. I told her everything. She didn't interrupt. "When I finished," she said, "I'll get Dad's laptop. He uses the same password for everything. I'll find what I can." It was the most dangerous thing she'd ever offered me, and the kindest. The following morning, she sent an encrypted file. Board member lists, meeting minutes, emails from someone labeled JH. Head of operations at Harmonia lit up. "Lark, we've got him." We compiled everything, cross-referenced it, built a timeline, names, roles, functions, and then we leaked it. Anonymous tips to reporters, encrypted drops to whistleblower websites. We even sent a copy to the Institute itself. The fallout was fast. The building was temporarily closed for renovations. A week later, their website vanished. A month after that, a reporter who tried to follow up disappeared. But we kept the backups. We spread them wide. And then one day, I received another card, same cursive. No return address, just a line. "They're still watching, but now they know you're not afraid." I didn't know if it was from Julia or someone else, but I taped it to my wall, next to my real birth photo, next to a Polaroid of Lark and me, smiling for once, not as subjects, but as survivors, and maybe, just maybe, as the beginning of something they couldn't erase. In the months that followed the leak, everything changed, but nothing really did. The news cycle spun briefly around the Harmonia Institute scandal. Local outlets reported a mismanagement of child services, while national media dipped their toes in before quietly moving on to the next crisis. No arrests. No real investigation. The story faded from headlines with suspicious ease, as if some unseen hand swept it under the rug before anyone could lift the corners. But beneath the surface, we knew something was moving. Lark and I stayed in contact through encrypted chatrooms and burner numbers. She was always on the move. Different cities, different names. I returned home. Not because I felt safe there, but because the answers I needed now were no longer in secret files or shadowy programs. They were closer. Personal. The kind of answers you can only get by looking someone in the eyes and asking the one question they've trained their whole life not to answer. My mother wasn't surprised when I walked back through the front door. "You're early," she said, just like Julia had. "I'm not staying," I replied. "I just want the truth." She sat at the kitchen table without a word, pulled out a folder I didn't know she had. Inside were photos, baby pictures of me with her and my father. But they didn't look like snapshots. They looked staged, like evidence. I flipped through them until I reached one taken in a white room with no furniture. Just a chair and a bassinet. She reached across and touched it lightly. "That's the day they handed you to me." I looked at her. "Who's they?" Her eyes didn't meet mine. "People who said they could help. People who said you were part of something bigger. They offered us a second chance at being parents. After everything we lost with Emily's twin." Her voice cracked, and I saw it then, the guilt, not performative, not manipulative. Real, raw grief buried under years of pretending. "You agreed to this?" I asked. She nodded. We thought you'd been abandoned, that you needed a home, but it wasn't until you were 5 that we learned more." "What did they tell you?" She looked sick. "That you were part of a study. That your early memories had been altered to help you adjust. That there were risks, but they'd monitor everything and intervene if anything went wrong. They even gave us scripts, things to say if you started asking questions." I stared at her, cold. "And when Julia came back, they warned us she was unstable, that she'd try to undo your progress, that contact could damage you. And you believed that?" "I didn't want to," she whispered. "But by then, I didn't know what was real anymore." My father walked in just as she finished speaking. He looked at us, eyes scanning the table, the folder, my face. He didn't say a word, just nodded, like he'd prepared for this moment and knew he had nothing left to offer. I stood up. "I'm leaving. I don't know if I'll ever come back, but I need you to understand something." They both looked at me like they already knew what I was going to say. "I'm not yours, and I'm not theirs either." Upstairs, I packed my bag. Emily followed me. "They're broken, you know," she said quietly. "Whatever they did to you, it broke them too." I zipped up my hoodie. "They had a choice. I didn't." She nodded. "I'm coming with you." I blinked. "What?" "You don't have to do this alone." And just like that, the girl who once kept my secrets now carried them too. We moved in with Julia, who welcomed us like we were returning from war. Maybe we were. Her house became our headquarters. Between shifts at a local cafe, we sifted through old files, reached out to names on the Pandora list. Most didn't answer. Some denied everything. But a few, just a few, responded. They had memories. Fragments. One girl remembered standing in a room lined with mirrors, told to smile while strangers took notes. A boy recalled reset chair, a recliner with wires and a screen that played videos on loop until he forgot why he'd been crying. Another described a dream that wasn't his, of running through a field and seeing a second version of himself in the distance, waving. Every story was different, but everyone felt like mine. By midsummer, we had 17 survivors in our network. Some were stable, some weren't. A few lived off the grid entirely, but all of them wanted to understand what had been done to them, and maybe even undo it. That's when Lark called. "I found something," she said. Or rather, someone. She sent me a name, Dr. Halden Grove, former neuroscientist at Harmonia, vanished in 2008, rumored to be in Canada under a new identity. "He was the lead on echo trials," she said. "He might have answers we can't get anywhere else." It took weeks, but we tracked him to a small town in British Columbia. Lark flew out to confirm, sent back a photo of a tired-looking man working in a bookstore. He goes by James now, but it's him. We debated what to do. Confrontation was risky, so we tried something different. Emily emailed him anonymously, pretending to be a researcher writing a book on experimental memory therapies. She referenced the ECHO program, used just enough technical language to make it plausible. He replied within 2 hours. "I don't talk about that anymore. There are things I regret, things I was forced into." That was all we needed. I flew to Canada the next day. Julia didn't want me to go. "You're not ready for what he might tell you." I looked at her. I wasn't ready for any of this. The bookstore was small, quiet, filled with the smell of old paper. I found him shelving biographies. "Dr. Grove?" I asked. He froze. "I'm Maya," I said. Subject 12. He didn't speak. Just sat down on a stool like someone had punched the air out of him. "I didn't think they'd let you remember," he said. "They didn't." But he looked at me, really looked. "You were the one they couldn't control. You kept dreaming. That's why they reassigned you." I sat across from him. "What did you do to us?" His eyes welled. I thought I was helping. We were told it was about resilience, measuring how identity could adapt when memory was shaped. But it wasn't research, it was programming, behavioral control. Why? They wanted obedient minds, people who could adapt to any reality, for high-risk roles. Negotiators, undercover agents, test subjects for trauma recovery. You were prototypes. Human tools. He nodded, ashamed. But you broke the loop. Your memories resisted the suppression. The echo effect? Emotional recall stronger than intellectual manipulation. I shivered. So that's why I felt haunted. Wes. You remembered things your brain had been trained to forget. But I left the bookstore feeling like I was floating. Not from relief, just the eerie calm that comes when a nightmare confirms itself in daylight. Back in the States, we compiled everything: Grove's testimony, survivor accounts, video evidence, internal files. We created a website, a public we called it The Ledger. Within weeks, it went viral. There were skeptics, deniers, conspiracy threads. But the truth stuck, because it wasn't just one person's story, it was dozens, then hundreds. The Institute tried to discredit us, threatened lawsuits, claimed we were disturbed individuals. But it was too late. We were more than subjects now. We were witnesses, and the world was finally listening. But as I lay in bed one night, staring at the ceiling, I had a feeling, cold, prickly, familiar, like someone watching. I rose, checked the windows, the doors, nothing. But on the front step beneath the mat was an envelope. No name, just one word, reset. And I realized this wasn't over, not even close. The envelope had no postage, no markings, just a single word on bone white paper in thick, deliberate ink. Reset. I turned it over in my hands again and again, half hoping some hidden message would appear in invisible ink, or that a clue would materialize under lamplight. But it was silent, perfectly plain, and somehow more terrifying than any noise. I didn't show it to Julia, or to Emily. Not right away. I needed time to think, to brace. I just started to believe we had taken something back. Stolen the steering wheel from those who'd written my life in the dark. But maybe we'd only cracked a window, and someone had already climbed inside. The next morning, our website, The Ledger, was gone. Not just hacked. Wiped. Every mirror, every backup. Even the encrypted cloud versions Lark had meticulously hidden in offshore data vaults. Gone. The archive we spent nearly a year building was now a blank page, a 404 that screamed louder than 1,000 testimonies. Lark called me immediately. It's not just us. Other accounts, too. The whistleblowers, the survivors. Some of them are unreachable. I could hear the panic behind her clipped words. Not fear, strategy. She was calculating, recalibrating. They're starting the cleanup, I whispered. No, she said. They already started, we just didn't notice. Later that day, I walked into Julia's flower shop to find her crying quietly behind the counter. That wasn't like her. I hadn't seen her cry once. Not when I told her about the files, not when I left for Canada, not even when we got the first death threat through the site's anonymous inbox. But now, what is it? I asked, heart pounding. She handed me her phone. On the screen was a name, Nola Rhodes, subject 17. She'd been found dead in her apartment. Carbon monoxide leak, they said. Routine accident. Nothing suspicious. But she was 23, healthy, and had a sealed window jammed open with a crowbar in the middle of winter. That didn't scream accident. I took the phone, hands shaking. They're erasing the board, Julia said flatly. One dot at a time. That night we convened. Lark, Julia, Emily, and I. We sat in the flower shop with blackout curtains drawn, candles lit like we were huddled during a storm. This isn't just about us anymore, Lark said. They're not just preserving the program, they're preparing to launch something new. What makes you think that? Emily asked. Lark tapped her laptop. The reset protocol. I found references to it in old Harmonia code. It's not just cleanup, it's a redeployment. New names, new identities, new trials. This time, international. They're spreading. I leaned in. So it wasn't about us. We were prototypes. Lark nodded. They let us run to see what we'd do, see how far we'd go. And now that they've studied the variables, they're ready for phase 2, a silence settled. Not fear, resolve. Then we have to stop them, I said. It wasn't bravado, it wasn't a plan, it was a need. But how do you kill a ghost in a mirror? The answer came 2 days later, in the most unexpected way. Emily, curious and impulsive, plugged Julia's old house phone back in during a storm. "What if they try to call?" she joked, and someone did. The line crackled. A voice, distorted, filtered, but unmistakably human. "Spokey, you've passed phase 1. We froze. "I can offer you truth," the voice continued. "Or you can continue to believe you found it on your own." But Julia lunged for the phone. "Who is this? You already know." The line went dead. We traced the call. It pinged from a disconnected number routed through 8 countries and a military-grade anonymizer. But Lark found something they hadn't masked well, a server location. Deep within an old government complex in Nevada, listed as decommissioned since 2011. We didn't have a choice. The next day we packed up and left. No flights, no GPS, no phones, just paper maps and a caravan of fear disguised as hope. Nevada welcomed us with silence and sand. The complex was exactly where it should have been, buried behind a canyon wall under an old weather station. We broke in through a service hatch pried open by rust and time. And what we found inside changed everything. It wasn't a lab. It wasn't even a control room, it was a museum. Walls lined with screens displaying photos of every subject. Audio logs, emotional heat maps, memories, personal belongings, like someone had curated us. Our lives, our pain, our growth, archived as data artifacts. We stared at our own faces, labeled with terms like instability index and adaptation velocity. We weren't people here. We were simulations. And in the center of the room, on a circular console, was a glowing prompt: initiate reset, rewind, and we stood there, frozen. "If we shut this down," Lark said, "we'll lose everything. The evidence, the data, the link between us and them. But if we don't," I whispered, "they build more of us." A long silence. And then Emily reached forward and pressed N. The screen flickered. "Override accepted. Welcome back, subject 0. We stepped back. The console rotated. A slot opened. A hard drive rose on a platform like an offering. We took it. And behind the console, a second screen blinked to life. A video began to play. It was me, a toddler, maybe 3, sitting on Julia's lap. I was humming. The camera zoomed in. My eyes, wide aware. A voice off, camera spoke. "This one's different. Let's see what happens if we let her choose." The screen went black. Julia's hand trembled as she reached for me. "I never saw this," she whispered. "I never consented." But someone had. The drive was everything. Every subject, every phase, every file. It was the source code. We released it to the world. This time differently. Not under one name. Not in one place. We scattered it. Let it seed into the corners of the internet, the private forums, the open source archives, the whistleblowers, the academics, the tech radicals. We gave the truth to everyone so no one could own it. And then we disappeared. We changed names, burned records, went offline, not to hide, to heal. Because even after all of it, after the resets, the programming, the betrayals, what remained wasn't fear, it was choice. One night, years later, I walked alone down a quiet street in Lisbon, now going by a different name. I passed a bookstore. Inside, a girl with pale hair stacked novels onto a shelf. She saw me, smiled. No words needed. She was still Lark, and I was still the girl who refused to forget. A little later, I found a postcard in my mail slot. No return address, no message, just a drawing. 3 circles, a triangle, and in faint ink, "Sometimes the ghosts win, but not always." I pinned it on my wall, next to the photo of Emily at the cafe, next to Julia's pressed lavender flower, next to a new photo, a child I'd just adopted. I named her Echo, not to erase the past, but to remember that even echoes start somewhere. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe and like the video.